two, check two. Check two, check two. Check two. 1, 2, check two. Check two. Yeah, good. Just to let everybody know, the Wi-Fi is right over where the pizza is, right at the top right corner of the second board, if you need the Wi-Fi, and also on the board on the way in.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Hey, we're about to get started, so just wanted to make a couple announcements before our talks and loose leaf play. First of all, we want to thank Guru again for sponsoring the space. As you know, some of the co-organizers do work here, but they've also been nice enough to help us sponsor the space and the food tonight, as well as the band. So big shout out to Guru for that. Woo! Woo! Thank you, Cody. And one thing on that note, we say it every time, but it's still the case. We are hiring pretty rapidly. So if you have any questions about any of the jobs on our site, feel free to ping us on Discord, on Slack, or come up and talk to us in person here at the event. Cool. Oh, yes. Dom just reminded me that we should remind everyone about the code of conduct, which you can find on our meetup page. Please take a look at that. That's sort of just our mission statement in terms of making this an inclusive space for everybody interested in tech or interested in just being here and being part of the community. So definitely take a look at that. It's sort of derived from our friends at Philly JS, who did a really great job at building out a code of conduct, and we'd like you to review it.
And speaking of that, the same thing that they said last time, I'm going to go with the same. If you do not agree with the code of conduct, or you feel like you don't want to be a part of this inclusive space, you're more than welcome to catch the door. We really want this to be, one of those spots you can come and learn and not feel uncomfortable at any moment. So if you're not with that, like, kick rocks, get out. Yeah, cool.
And that also applies to our Discord server, which we set up recently, that if you haven't joined, you should. A lot of us are in there chatting. We'll update you about community events, but the code of conduct applies there as well. So don't think you can come here and be nice and then go in there and be an asshole. Pardon my language. This has no segue, so I'm not going to bother. We've been growing rapidly, as you might know. You saw we had 100 RSVPs for tonight. We're over 350 members on Meetup officially right now. Woo! So give it up to yourselves for building this community along with us. And we decided that would be sort of fun to randomly, whoever registered as the 300th person would get a gift from the co-organizers. And we have our 300th member here today, Sam. Right over here. Sam, if you want to give everybody a wave. So being that this is a JavaScript meetup, we bought Sam a copy of ES6 and Beyond from the You Don't Know JS series, which is like just awesome if you haven't checked it out, so please do. Sam, if you would like to come up and receive your gift, please join us on the stage. Thank you. And Sam, you're required to take a photo with us later. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're photo opping that.
Another new thing we have going on this week, as you might have seen downstairs, if you didn't get one, we're handing out Reactadelphia stickers that we had ordered a couple weeks ago. They finally came in. We want to share them with y'all. We're limiting it to one per person tonight just because we don't know how many people are going to come out to the events. But if you haven't got one when you were registering downstairs, please come see one of the co-organizers and we can provide you with one. Okay, cool. And then just one note about next month. Next month, we're going to be sort of introducing something we've tried at the Vue.js meetup before, where we're going to have remote speakers zooming in and speaking to us remotely from where they are. And we have two really big popular names in the tech space. One is Jason Langsdorff from the Gatsby team. He will be talking to us remotely next month, as well as Nader Dabbit, who's a member of the AWS developer advocate team. And so we're hoping to do more of these in the future. We have Ali Spittle from the Practical Dev. She'll be speaking in September. So just keep an eye on the Discord channel and the meetup page, and we'll update you on more of these exciting speakers.
Another thing is definitely use our Discord as a way to communicate with any of our remote speakers. You know, one of the things that was brought to my attention when we started recruiting remote speakers was that it's a little hard for them to have as much engagement with the crowd as you would if you were here. So we definitely want to show them, you know, a little bit of Philly love and you know, be able to make them feel like they're included even if they're not in our space. So, you know, if that's something that we could do and get together on Discord and communicate with them there, that would be awesome.
One other thing to note, as usual, we'll be live streaming this tonight. This time we will download it within the window of 14 days that Twitch provides. But we're going to start uploading these live streams to a YouTube channel so people can reference them later. So we'll share information about that in the future, but that is coming soon. So just keep an eye out. And without further ado, let's get to the talks, and feel free to stay around for an awesome set from Loose Leaf afterwards. Thanks for coming.
Great. Zach Butcher. No. Yeah, so we have 3 speakers next month. We're going to be intermixing remote with in person. So it's just going to be, you know, first come, first serve with how we, you know, set up the talks. But as far as we know, we don't have any like fully remote talks yet. We're still going to be doing it in person. I'd still much rather have like, you know, an actual meetup in person, but I wanted to continue to the same way we allocate a live stream for people who can't make it to the meetup. I really want to introduce that remote speaking type of thing to kind of continue that, you know, notion. So thanks for the question, Zach.
Yeah, and we're going to try to not have all remote speaker events. We're going to try to mix them. This is just a way for us to get, say, someone from the React core team. If we could get someone like that to speak to us, that'd be great. And then we wouldn't have to support their travel. Right now, we're not capable of doing that, but in the future, we're going to try to make that a possibility as well.
If your company is interested in making that a possibility, you know where to find me.
Yes, please talk to Dom about your company sponsoring us. Okay, this time we're seriously going to get off the stage.
So we're going to have Zack Davis coming up for a lightning talk. It's going to be on style components. Zack Davis.
I'm on it. I am shorter than you, though. Yeah, I'm definitely shorter than you. I don't know. No, it's fine. I'll deal with it. All right. Hang on, everyone. Hear me okay? You're gonna chill me, dude. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Zack Davis, and I'm here to talk about style components. You can find me at that Zack Davis pretty much anywhere on social media and Medium, on the Discord. I hang out there a lot. So I just want to get right into it. Let's talk about what style components are all about. Basically, the first page of the documentation says using components as a low-level styling construct could not be easier. And I tend to agree. You can use style components in your React or React Native applications where you just simply create a new component, wrap it with some styles using template literals, and which allow for string interpolation, calling functions, things like that. It has a built-in theming system, and as well as Babel and Jest plugins. This helps transpile your code, as well as you can even test the specifics that are side effects that are happening from style components. But using style components in and of itself does not prevent you from testing any of the functions that your code might be calling or anything like that. You only have one dependency to import. You're just importing style components straight up. Pretty easy to start with. And that's all well and good, but how does it actually help your application? Now, when you load the page, only the necessary styles are loaded for what is visible on the page. So you aren't loading a big, huge style sheet like you might be used to when you started up with a Bootstrap application. You don't have a big style CSS and Bootstrap CSS file just downloading right to the client. And you can style your components based on the props, and that's where those template literal strings come in. You can do ternaries, call functions, and determine which styles to actually apply to that component directly within your literal definition there. You don't have to worry about remembering class names anymore. Like col-md2. I know that's a medium column 2 in Bootstrap because I used it so much, but now I can get that out of my memory, hopefully. There's also, since there's no class names, you're not going to have as many colliding styles and rules to worry about. You also aren't going to have to remember which things need vendor prefixes for which browsers or anything like that. It's going to automatically handle that for you. Like when you make a Flexbox definition, you don't have to append your Mozilla and your WebKit on there. It's going to do that for you. Style components are automatically scoped as well, which is huge, especially in the micro front-end world that a lot of people are moving towards. I personally have to make micro front-ends at my job, and I can't have my styles collide with anything else on the page because the React applications we are making have to be good citizens on that page because they're just directly embedded into other applications. So the styles that we write in style components, they get a generated class name and they won't collide with anything else there. So that sounds like a lot of buzzwords, and it really is, but code is king. So let's look at just a sample bit of code there. This is right on Style Components homepage, actually, and it's how they style their GitHub button to link directly to their repo. So as we can see, it looks a lot like CSS within that literal string, and we're using the props that are passed in to the component. So if you pass in primary, it's going to change the background from transparent to white and give it that pale violet red color for the font instead of the white color. So it makes it stand out more, and that's why they call it their primary color. And the markup is pretty simple. Here they have their code example of their 2 buttons on there. And as we can see, the GitHub button is primary. The React prop, if you don't give it a value, it's just default pass in as true. So primary is true there for the GitHub button. So we're going to get that pale violet red button. But then for the documentation, it's going to be that transparent that we saw on the previous slide because it isn't set as primary. Another cool thing about Style Components, it is used across many different companies and is very heavily documented. I listed out a ton of companies. Coinbase might pop out to you, Airbnb, Reddit. My company's HomeNet, I put us on there because we use it. But there's a ton of big companies using it and 18 organizations actually sponsoring the development of it. So you can be sure that it's not going to go away. And so when you want to start using it, whenever you use any open source library or any external libraries, you want to make sure it's going to be supported. And that's why Style Components is a good choice because there's 18 orgs and 60 plus people sponsoring the development of it, as well as a ton of people using it. We have 39 plus million downloads and over 100,000 repos just depending on Style Components, as well as over 1,000 questions on Stack Overflow, which it doesn't sound like a lot. Personally, I think that it's a medium amount, which is good. It means their documentation is actually really good and answers a lot of questions before people ask it, but there's still enough people trying to use it that they are asking questions. There's also a large ecosystem built around Style Components. So we have a handful of UI toolkits and frameworks built on it, as well as versions of Bootstrap components built into styled components. So you can easily inject your own styles in there and not have to worry about all the different Bootstrap CSS or Sass. There's also the Just Style Components plugin to allow you to unit test your side effects there, as well as media helpers, grids, and there's a ton on there, and they're listed right alongside the documentation there on the Style Components site. And Style Components, as I mentioned, is under a lot of development, and there's a ton of new stuff coming. But the rundown is in version 5, when they come out, they're going to have 31% smaller bundle size, 22% faster client-side mounting, 26% faster dynamic style updates, as well as built-in React testing library support for testing those side effects. So you won't need that Just plugin anymore. It'll be part of the core library. And that's on top of how fast this already is. We've done some minimal user testing on our applications that are using Style Components now, and no one really notices any sort of painting or anything like that happening now. And it's only getting faster in the next version that's currently in beta. And that's pretty much it for Style Components. threw some credits on here. I got the template from Sly Carnival, and those cool code screenshots are using Carbon. And I did want to mention my company's hiring too. I'm not trying to compete with you guys or anything, but
You're out of here, dude. Sorry.
Yeah. So, all right, real quick though, we're out in Exton, PA, so a little further away. It's about an hour drive with traffic out in the burbs there. But if you're interested looking for either a front end role, there's a senior opening on my team, and we have a ton of full stack roles as well across the country because Cox Automotive is a large company. So we're definitely looking for cool, good people and good devs. And I wanted to thank everyone for coming and Guru hosting and everything. And wanted to ask if there were any questions about solid components I could try and give some answers to.
So with the style components, are you building within a design system, or is this really just you've got a bunch of wireframes and you're trying to match colors, spacing, font, whatever?
So we are building the design system kind of as we go. So we're kind of trying to closely follow the atomic design principles. If you've seen Brad Foss talk or read any of his blogs, he talks about that a lot. But we're building it as we go. So it's purpose built. It's built with real user story acceptance criteria, and we're building the components with style components in our UI toolkit, and then pulling them into our application. So they are living separately. So we're aiming to reuse those in the future. We started this effort in January. So it's pretty small right now, maybe 15 components. And as we build more applications, we'll build that out. But we are going from the wireframe to that design system to start with. And then hopefully we'll really build mockups from the design system itself in the future.
Actually, I have a question.
Cool.
When you started using style components, I don't know if you have them in their own and then import them in, or do you like inline them with your components themselves? And when you do that, have you ever found yourself feeling a little bit cluttered while using style components? Because I love style components, but my biggest feeling when I started using them was a little bit of clutter inside of my files themselves. Did you feel that at all?
Yeah, definitely with larger components that have more actual functionality in them, it does begin to feel cluttered. That's when I recommend pulling the style component into its own file as well within the same subdirectory as that component. So you might have an alert, and if that alert has a ton of functionality that depends on different props being passed in, you might want to have a styled alert file and then actually import styled alert back into the page that you're using. We've also, in terms of building the different components, some of them we've started within the application themselves and ripped them out into the toolkit, and some we started in the toolkit. It seems to work better if you have a lot of dependent functionality that you started within the application to really be able to demo that and show that what you're building is correct and then pull it out later. A simple presentational component is probably easier just to start within your design system repo, just because there's less overhead then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions? We have a couple more. Good to go? All right. Thanks a lot, Zach.
All right. Thank you.
We're going to go with a quick little 5-minute break. If you guys got to go to the bathroom or anything like that, please do. And then we will be moving on to our next speaker. Bring you up at like 6:35. Nope. Yeah, you're going to use that. Yeah. You can turn your camera off as well. Dude, it was in every picture we took last time. I just had to continue shouting out because we literally just standing. Sponsored by Gritty. Not by the Flyers. No, this one's sticking. Sponsored by Gritty. We are Gritty. Whatever you want. Yeah, if you don't use it, you have like a person. Yeah, I would just. Yeah. I do it when I just turn everything off. And then you suddenly realize there's nobody's looking. Ziemba. Could have at least warned me you're going to blind me. All right, everybody, we're going to be moving on to our second talk of the night. Excuse me? I'm so sorry. Thank you. Joe Ziemba is going to be coming up to talk about render props, how and why. Please give it up for Joe.
Oh, thank you, friends. You're too kind. Let me turn my screen share on and get this. This is good. This is fine. I'm not that tall. Hi, everybody. as I get my screen share up, today, as we were told, I'm talking about the React render prop. How many people here know what that is already? You know it. How many people have like written code that used a render prop? How many people have written a component that like took its own render prop? Significantly less people. Awesome. That's why I'm here today. So I'm going to teach you guys what the render prop is. There was a time not too long ago where this esoteric piece of code seemed kind of useless to me. I didn't really understand what it was for. And then I finally got a good use case to use it. And I thought I would share all that with you today. So before we get into that, real quick, who am I? Why should you listen to me? My name is Joe Ziemba. I am a software engineer at Elsevier. We are a medical publishing and technology company right over on 16th and JFK. I work mostly in JavaScript and React, and a little bit in C# and .NET Core. That bar graph is not to scale. I'm also a boot camp grad, which means I'm also a career changer. I used to work in marketing. I took a boot camp a couple years ago, and now I am a developer.
What boot camp did you take?
I was at Launch Academy.
Oh, dope.
They're no longer here in Philly, sadly, but they originated and are still kicking in Boston. I'm also a cat dad. I have 2 cats. If you're not a cat person, don't at me. And I'm also a tabletop gamer. I play a lot of D&D and some other random tabletop games, all around generally huge nerd. So it's a good reason to listen to things I have to say, right? So the render prop, what is it? Why do we care about it? The render prop's not like a new sexy API. It's not context. It's not hooks. It's not a library. It's not like anything new. It's actually just a very clever use of like React's normal set of features. Props. You've heard of props, I hope. So this is the documentation from reactjs.org. The term render prop refers to a technique for sharing code between React components using a prop whose value is a function. Sounds fairly straightforward, yet not entirely informative. It's not the whole story. So it is a prop. We covered that. It is a prop that's value is a function. Very true. That function tells a component what children it should render. Basically, you're going to give this component a prop that says render this instead of whatever maybe you were going to render yourself. And that provides data back from the parent to the children that it renders. So let's look at it more visually, might make some sense. So this is a pretty standard representation of a component with a render prop. You see it has a prop and it's a function. That function is an anonymous arrow function, takes a render props argument in it. That function returns some instructions on what to render. You're going to render another component, and you're going to pass that render props argument into that component as its own props. So that data gets passed from the parent to the child. That's the big key there. So how does that even work? Looking at the other side, we're going to get slightly less abstract as we go along, so slightly closer to real code. This is our breathtaking application. It's beautiful, isn't it? It returns that same thing we just saw. Component, render prop, returns another component. So, go back one. So when that function, that component, your application renders, it's going to go into the component. Some code magic's going to happen, whatever's going to happen. And then in its render function, instead of returning another component or some JSX or a div or whatever you want to put in there, it's going to call that prop. It's going to call this.props.render or just props.render if it's not a class. And that's what's going to trigger the actual visual render. So it has no instructions of its own. It needs that prop to be told what it needs to render. So making it a little bit more relevant, let's pass another prop in here. Let's pass a value. That value for now is going to be 2. Do whatever you want, probably something dynamic. Otherwise, this would be pointless. But for now, it's 2. So that 2 is going to go in. Say this component has another function in it, is even. So it's going to tell you if the value that was passed in is even. So when this component goes to render, it's going to call this.props.render, and it's going to construct that argument, that render props object that's going to get passed back into what it's going to render. That object is, right now I'm spreading all the props. So I'm spreading the props into, it's not that easy to see on there, is it? Spreading all the props into that, along with an isEven object. So isEven calls that function, gives you that Boolean result, is it even or not? So when that calls, it's going to render the component it was given. Another component's going to handle all the visual rendering. This is what is going to handle all of your visual logic, and it's going to take those props in. So you don't have to pass them directly. It gets passed through the render prop, and so it has access to props.value, props.isEven, and any other props you might have passed in, because it's all coming in here. Makes sense? Yeah. All right, cool. So that's how it works. Why on earth would you do this? It seems kind of complicated, not really getting much. I already know that 2 is even. Why? Why on earth? Mostly to abstract and reuse code. This is a really great tool to keep your code clean, to take logic of data processing that's going to happen over and over and over again, and put it somewhere where you can reuse it without having to write it all the time. So to give you a good concrete example of that, I'm going to tell you what happened to me that made me realize render props is actually super useful, even if it's a little confusing. So imagine for a moment, you work at a company, let's call that company Elsevier. Your product owner comes to you one day and says, I have some requirements for you. I need you to build something for me. Never happens. So the thing is a sign-up form. We need you to build a sign-up form. It requires a name and it requires an email. So we need to take in. I want it to check that those values are valid before they submit. I want that to happen, and I want some visual feedback to go back to the user so they know this is right or this is wrong. Those are our requirements. That's what we're gonna build for our product owner. So now let's look at some actual code. I, ever prepared, have already started on these requirements for us. So I already have a form. It takes a name and an email. We can look at it right here, pretty standard. I'm so sorry if you can't see it. I'm making it a little bigger. Pretty standard form, React form. Tracks the values in state. It's got an on change, got an on submit, renders a couple form inputs. There you go. All right. So we need to put some validation in this. We need to know when I type in here, is that valid? Is there nothing here? Can I submit this form? It's not telling me as the user anything. So we got to start putting some validation logic in there. First step, how we're going to do that. All right, well, we'll just put it right in the form. Let's track validation right in state, right? It seems easy enough. That's what we did originally. It was not a good idea. I don't recommend this, by the way. So tracking the validation in state, then you need to have a validate function, right? So now your validate function lives here. It's going to check your values. Don't worry about how it's doing it. That's really not important for this part. But it's going to check your values, and it's going to set some validation to state. So let's see what that looks like. Return form 2. All right, now I'm getting some visual feedback here. If it's required, I can type it in. All right, and now it's green. It says it's fine. Good to go. Look at that. I can submit it. It's going to work. All right. This isn't necessarily the best way to do it, though. Mostly because, so this form is going to work, right? Your form is going to work really well here, but this is not very dry. Dry stands for, as we all know, don't reprimand Yetis. Exactly. Don't repeat yourself. So if you do it this way, every time you have another form in this application, say, all right, this is our sign-up form. What about our login form? You're going to have to rewrite this validation logic again. And then on every other form you're going to have. We don't want to do that. So let's check out a better option. Form number 4 has a couple changes in here. I should put it on here too, so you can all see what it does. Form number 4 has a couple new components in it. One of them is an input component. Input component is not particularly exciting. It just abstracts away a lot of that nasty code that was in there before to make it a little prettier. But it has something new in it. It has the validator. Our validator is our component with a render prop. You'll also notice, if you look up here, that validation function is gone. That now lives in the validator component. Zoom keeps getting in my way when I try to click things. Excuse me. All right. So validator is going to have that logic in itself. It's going to be able to generate error messages. It's going to get a value, and it's going to check if it's valid. Right now, it's just checking if it's not an empty string. That's all we need to do for right now. So before, when we had it in here, we moved it to here. So we're passing in validator, or calling validator, we're passing in the value, and then we're passing in a render prop. Our render prop's rendering our input. It's taking in an on-change method and a name, and then all the rest of the validator props are getting passed back from validator, which right now is just this is valid Boolean and an error message of what that should be. Cool. So we did it, right? Our clients should be super happy. Our product owner is like, great, this is awesome. Look at that. It does the thing. But then your product owner comes back to you, right? And it's going to say, all right, this never happens. Requirements never change. But imagine, if you will, that the requirements have changed. The email needs to validate that it's a real email address too. I don't want just anything. I want to make sure there's an @ symbol in there. This has to be an email format. All right, fine. If we'd done it the other way, we have to do it everywhere. Every single form that needed an email would have to have that in there. But this way, we can add to our validator a handy check for an email. So if I turn this on, I go back over here, let's say I flag this. All right, there's an email prop on Validator now. So this one's marked as email. So Validator knows, do an extra check on this. So I can type in my name. There it is. And now when I start typing, it changed. Look at that. So now you can have pretty much infinite validation logic right in that one component. The big benefit to this is you can use it everywhere. You can put anything into it. So it doesn't just render a text field. It also could render radio buttons. It can render checkboxes. It can render a text area if you want to get crazy. Whatever you want it to render. That's the beauty of the render prop. And yeah, if I finish the email address format, it does work. I stole that regular expression from the internet. I didn't write it myself. But here, there it is, if you want to read the whole thing. Yeah, so that gives us a huge amount of power to reuse that code everywhere you want. You don't have to rewrite it. And if you have to update it, requirements change, you add new validation logic. We've expanded this, almost this exact same component. It's called Validator in our actual code base. We've expanded this to do email checks, special character checks. We have custom validation functions that our users can write JavaScript conditions to make sure the value can't be more than 100, and then it will run those for them. So it's super powerful, and we've been able to do it all because of the handy dandy render prop. And that's pretty much all I have for you today. Went a little faster than I thought it would, but that leaves lots of time for questions, and I'm sure you all have plenty. So please hit me with them. Ask me anything, render props or otherwise.
So this is more of a semantic question. Is there a reason why you're using render as a prop versus typically the other way I've seen this used is as children as a render function? So you'll provide a function as a child, and then that will be used. So this.props.children, do it that way.
Yeah, so children is another way you can do a similar thing. It's a little bit different as far as how the React API actually works with it. Children, you can pass in the same way. I imagine you could probably do it exactly the same if you wanted to. I do it with the render prop specifically because the render prop implies that this component won't render anything other than what you put in here. So semantically, it very much says render this. With children, there could be other stuff that it also renders. Frequently with children, you'll like wrap it and it'll render like a header, but then it'll put the children underneath it or something like that. So semantically, I prefer the render prop when it's handling completely what you should render in this case. Anybody else? Yeah. This code is available. It is on my GitHub. You know, they asked me if I had any social media we should like show you guys. I was like, no, I don't use social media, but I do have a GitHub. It is my name, Joe Ziemba, if you want to find it. I can't show it to you now, but here, I'll spell it for you. That's it. You can find me on GitHub there. It is publicly available. It's called Render Props Talk. You can take a look at all the code. There's 5 forms, 2 validators, and 2 text inputs if you want to go wild and play with all of it.
We're also probably going to, for whoever has it available, we're going to post a lot of this stuff in the Discord as well. So you'll find most of the stuff like links and slides in the Discord.
So when I say a component that uses a render prop, validator would be a component that uses. It accepts a prop called render and it does something with it. Yeah. So like I've seen before I wrote one that took a render prop, I used render props. But like if you use a lot of React form libraries, almost all of them use render props in some capacity. So I've passed a render prop to a component. But this was the first time I wrote a component that took a render prop. Semantic difference, small but important. All right. Yeah. Oh, they're gonna bring microphones out.
Oh, all right. I could be really loud.
You've
though.
seen them like chase you down.
Can I hold it? Okay. I'm gonna ask probably the silliest question, but I assume that I know children does have like semantic meaning to React. I assume render does not actually have.
It does not.
It's like just like you could do like a foo or bar or whatever. Just
you can call it anything as long as it matches on both sides. Like you can just call this dot props dot.
Okay.
Pick a word. I can't think of any words right now, but you pick a word and you can call it that.
I'll probably go with render because it makes the most sense. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
Yeah, it's just, it's not part of the React API at all. Passing a render prop by itself, unless you've built the component to actually call props.render, will do nothing. So don't do that. Make sure you have a component that actually does something with your render prop. All right, got one in the back.
So another alternative is high order components. Do you still use higher order components, or do you feel like this replaces the need for those?
I avoid higher order components at like nearly all cost. Mostly for me personally, I don't really like the semantics of how like they look. They're not visually like easy to understand for me. I get how they work. I've written them before, but I don't really like them. Coming back to use one, I tend to forget like how did I set all this up? So I definitely, and it's also harder to test. It's a lot easier to unit test. We do a lot of unit testing in my job. A lot easier to unit test a component that takes a render prop than it is to unit test a higher order component for me.
Thank you.
Your mileage may vary.
Any other questions?
Oh, geez. I think there was the React team has kind of talked about how hooks will kind of get rid of render props.
Yeah.
Because when you're sharing logic across components, you can just throw it into a hook. I think somebody's going to talk about custom hooks actually.
Yeah, right after this.
Yeah.
Melody will be talking about hooks right after this. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So what do you think about that? Is it one of those things where like don't change everything into hooks when not needed? Like I think some of the issues with render props are like if you have nested ones, you end up with this like kind of callback kind of thing, and it starts to get very complicated. Maybe it's like a little harder to test or something like that. I don't know. What do you just like general thoughts about that?
So I've never nested a render prop. I imagine that would get very messy. I don't think I would want to do it. I've also never really used hooks, like very small amount dabbled in hooks. Looking forward to hear more about it after this. From what I do know about hooks, I don't see it necessarily replacing the need to ever use a render prop. Because from what I understand about hooks, every time you define like an action or I can't remember what they're called now, the thing that makes something happen. I'm very technical, everybody. You have to define it every time. So it would kind of take away that ability to reuse this logic by passing your component to it as a render prop. If every time you have to call your use state or use effect method, that's the one, use effect method, and kind of write the semantics out of that every time. But I don't know. And I'm sure Melody might be able to inform us a lot better. So please answer that question for me, Melody, because I don't know. All right, anybody else? Yeah.
Hey, you said something early on about you wouldn't put validation information in state, something like that. Remember that part?
Yes, I do.
What was that part? What did you mean?
This part right here. So this was kind of our interim option. When we first had to add validation to a form, we added it right in the form component itself. So this is like form number 2, and we're tracking the validation of each field right here.
Okay, so it's a Boolean there. Okay. And,
Yeah,
and
so
why do you not do that?
I don't do that because then every time you have a form, you have to track state everywhere. It becomes very messy. You're repeating the same, like this, this validate method would have to be in every form component you ever had. So instead of doing that, you just pass your input component to your validator and it handles all that logic, all the tracking of state, whether it's valid, more advanced features like if the field's been attempted before, so you don't show the error message like right on load like that. So you want it to show a neutral state first. You can track things like if they've ever clicked on it, pass an on blur method through. It's a fun, there's actually part of this repo has that in it too. So if you want to check it out on GitHub, you can see form number 5 has that in it. But yeah, so that's why I wouldn't track it in state if I didn't have to.
We got time for about one more question, if anybody has one.
One more down here. Cool. All right.
Yeah, I guess in your experience, and I noticed that you seem to be spreading out all the props that are passed to validator as well as passing in props to like the subcomponent when you render it. Like, do you find that one is better than the other? Because obviously they kind of do the same thing, right?
What do you mean one or the other? Spreading it where?
Like for that, right? You're passing value to the validator. But you like could feasibly. I mean, I guess it needs that. So like in theory, you could put the on change and the name to just pass that to validator as well, and then just have return input because you're spreading validator props. Because like if you're assuming you're passing all of the props to input from validator that validator's getting. Does that make any sense?
It does.
Out loud.
There you go.
Right. So
you're absolutely correct.
Like, has that been a thing you've decided between as a construct, or is it mostly just the only thing you pass to validator is things the validator actually needs?
I try to limit it to only pass things that the validator is going to need, mostly because you don't want to tie it to whatever input's going to be there. So you want to make sure that you're returning a consistent set of props that are going to be relevant to any component that can get rendered in there. Because you can always additionally call, like, you can overwrite them too. So if I wanted to put the value in here, I can like just straight up call value is validator props.value. So you can do it all manually too. You don't have to spread it. Spreading it is just like a very handy, easy shorthand. And I did a lot of spreading in this just to keep from like a ton of code on the screen. We don't always use the object spread for everything. I use it as much as I can. It's really easy. If anyone doesn't know what the spread operator is, go look it up. It's really useful. It's that 3 dots.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate it. Give a round of applause for Joe.
So we're going to take another little break for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have our hooks talk from Melody, which will segue perfectly from Joe's talk. See you in 10.
Just for posting. Posting. This is how we do it. Oh, that's serious.
It's gonna get to the point where like that like I don't know what to do. We're gonna have to start having that.
Maybe what we do is like 6:30.
But right now 6 means it can be working like straight here. Nope, 21.
Are you serious? It feels like it's been tested.
Make sure I have the serve on. Yeah.
You're gonna give them a 2-minute warning.
Cool. Yeah.
You have stuff to say?
Not really. Do you have? Oh, let me see if this. Let me see if my screen share works.
You gotta, yeah, go to share. Oh, is that like your extended desktop?
Oh gosh. No, it's showing my cursor, but it's not showing the windows.
What's that?
It's showing my cursor, but it's not showing the windows.
What the? I hate Zoom. Hey, Cody.
Look at this.
Is it? Do you have multiple desktops set up?
No.
I'm gonna have to announce you. Hey, everybody. It hasn't been exactly 10 minutes, or at least that's what, Dom, how many minutes has it been?
It's been 8.
It's been 8 minutes, so I'm 2 minutes early. So that gives me time to introduce our next speaker, Melody Starling over here, who's gonna talk to us about hooks. And also, Melody has requested I read their bio, so let me try it. Melody is a 10x cactus taco eater, internet squid, and storyteller from Philadelphia. Sometimes they'll cook up a fresh website or two with whiz and react on a fresh amoroso roll. Did I say that? Okay. You can find Melody online at melody.dev. Melody used to be an intern here at Guru and is an amazing speaker, so I'm excited to see this. Thanks, Melody.
Thank you. All right. So, how's everyone doing tonight?
Woo! You all sound tired. How's everyone doing tonight?
Good.
Wonderful. So today I'm going to be doing a lightning talk where I'll be explaining custom React hooks without a single line of code. So can you all hear me all right? Wonderful. All right. So hey everyone, I'm Melody. My pronouns are they and them. I love tacos, tea, unicorns, and obviously trains. And of course, the reason I'm here and the reason all of us are here is because, we all do web development. So this is what my website looks like. I'm online at melody.dev. So let's talk about hooks. In case you're not familiar with it, my friend Dan here says when he introduced hooks, he said that hooks let you use state and other React features without writing a class. So let's see what that means. So let's say you want to build a blog. Where can hooks be used? So So you might be wondering, the first thing you might wonder is where can custom hooks be used? Or in other words, where is stateful logic involved? So in other words, that means that, where are states needed across components? And better yet, where can this logic be reused between components? So you may not be able to see it from a distance, but I included a few examples of where custom hooks can be used. So let's see here. So basically, we have. So basically, I included a few features in this blog where custom hooks can be implemented. So for example, we have like a page a navigation toolbar, and what do you call them, and read indicators on whether or not you read a specific blog post. And on top of that, I also created like a light theme and dark theme toggle. So basically, the type of logic that the read and unread indicators and the navigation involves is obviously, for example, user history, and then dark mode. Type of logic required in dark mode is reading local storage or users' preferences. So let's make a hook. So hooks are basically just writing your own hooks. Hooks and Reacts are basically just functions that follow, like a specific convention. But the general gist of it is that, it has to start with the word use, and more importantly, you'll be able to use other hooks in them. Notably, like use state, which is built into React, and other custom hooks as well. So let's revisit that blog example again. And so here's an example of a hook you can rewrite that can be reused across components. So since the navigation links and the read indicators rely on, for example, let's say page history, then you can use a single hook to handle history, to handle the logic for both of these components. And this is great because this reduces duplication by moving your logic outside of, say, for example, higher order components into its own function. So another thing I love about custom hooks is that because custom hooks are reusable across components and that they're basically functions, you can share them. In most cases, you can share them on the internet for other people to use. So there's this website I found called usehooks.com that has some custom hooks based on some common use cases. I can actually show you some example here. If I can do it here. There you go. So for example, there's some chances are you want to, find a common piece of logic that's shared across many websites. You probably find it here. So for example, there's a hook for event listener, dark mode I just showed you, media queries, scroll jacking. I don't know why you want to do that. Like history and so forth, key presses and so forth. So basically, use dark mode is one of those hooks I found, and it's a hook. And the beauty of this is that with a single line of code, there's a hook that I can import and implement with just a single line of code. So basically, by implementing the hook, for example, into say the dark mode switcher and also potentially a higher order component, I can use it to say toggle between dark mode and light mode on this example here. So that's a quick intro to custom React hooks without showing a bunch of lines of code. So use your imagination. So most important thing when it comes to custom hooks is to use your imagination. So the React docs has some really helpful resources on how to create your own custom hooks. And then the website I just showed you is called usehooks.com, where there's like a directory of custom hooks that you can import. So there you have it. This is where you can find me on the internet. Thank you so much.
Cool to take some questions. Anybody have any questions? Good to go? All right. Thank you so much, Mel.
Thank you. So yeah, I tried my best to explain this without showing you a single line of code. So let me know how I did.
I mean, I couldn't have done it. So, I mean, you're way more impressive than I am in that space. So we're finished up a little early. If we want to use this time to mingle, I know we've stopped you 15 times from doing so in our intermissions. So, go ahead. We're going to have our musical performance coming on around 8:15. So please stick around for the loose leaf and, talk to you guys in a little bit.